Do you guys want to tell me where we are?
Oh, hello.
Oh, hey.
Oh, hey, we're at Alpha right now. A bunch of people are talking about where they feel like they belong in New York City.
That's right. Yeah. Question everything. And so we're getting them to question
everything.
Yeah, where they. We're just trying to show people the power that they have to do something about this issue of loneliness and belonging. Because unlike a lot of other problems in the world that maybe we don't have as much power over, when it comes to belonging, we actually have a lot of power to learn how to belong to ourselves, and we have a lot of power to foster a sense of belonging amongst people that we know, our neighbors, our friends, maybe even people we don't know so well, just through very, very simple actions. So we're just trying to make that easier and easier for people to really feel like they can take action to help out with.
What do you guys say about that?
Amen. True.
Yeah.
Good word.
So I first met you, both of you, a couple months ago, and you were talking about this initiative to help 1 million people find belonging this year, right? Belonging is such a broad word. And so I want to dive in first of why is it so important for people to find belonging, to foster belonging?
Yeah, so the reason we wanted to talk about finding belonging is because, as a lot of you know, I really care about reducing loneliness in the world. Loneliness is a huge public health crisis. It impacts early mortality just as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But the problem is when we both started thinking about how do we create a campaign that reduces loneliness, loneliness is in the negative. People don't want to really broadly talk about how they're lonely. As much as I'm trying to reduce the stigma around it, it's still something that people aren't super pumped to shout from the rooftops, their experience of loneliness. But everyone can own that they want to find more belonging. It's kind of the inverse of loneliness. And so to say, okay, how can we do the opposite of being lonely? How can we feel like we belong to ourselves? How can we feel like we belong to our friends and our community? Because that's a really exciting question that a lot of people can get behind.
Yeah.
And it's a tribal need. It's part of our human needs. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's just above shelter and basic survival is love and belonging. And so we, as kind of tribal creatures from our kind of like cave person days, right? If you didn't have a group of people to help with your survival, if you didn't kind of like get along with other people, you were going to starve, or you were going to get eaten by wolves or something. You know,
Sure.
like you weren't going to make it. And so we have it baked into our nature that we have to belong. And if we don't find it in a healthy way, we will create it or find it in maybe an unhealthy way, or we'll be manipulated into finding it in bad ways. And so that's kind of leading to a lot of the bad things that we're seeing going on in the world right now. Part of why we're trying to do this is to help people kind of find it in a healthier way.
Sure. You pulled out the term loneliness epidemic, right? Why is this an epidemic? And how does it kind of affect us on a personal level, and maybe even on a professional level?
Yeah, so I feel like loneliness is such an epidemic because it's tied to so many diseases, and it's a thing that impacts a ton of Americans. Just to give some more stats, I always feel weird because I'm like, these are all really sad bummer statistics. I'm just gonna like bum all of you out right now. Is the average American has one close friend. 75% of Americans are not satisfied with the friendships that they do have. So that's saying, zoom out, you have one friend probably, and you probably don't like that friend. It's not great. It's really not great. And then also, when you look at, I know we're
You're welcome to leave whenever.
Yeah, we're like, also, like, I hate this woman. She's making me sad. So when we think about, okay, there's this many people in America who are lonely, at the same time, we're spending a third of our lives at work. And so there's clearly a connection between loneliness and the workplace.
Sure.
And if you're someone who runs a company, you want to make sure your employees are happy and healthy, not just for their own benefit, but because they're going to be showing up at the office, giving their full energy, they're going to be there more often. If you have employees who are dropping off because they're more susceptible to heart disease, to depression, these are all things that loneliness are directly connected to. It's not good news for anyone.
Sure. I'm guessing there's some sort of personal moment that really drew you to this work, and I'm curious to hear what that is for both of you.
Oh my goodness. Personal moment?
Sure.
I'd say all of my childhood. I just feel like, I don't know, I was very fortunate. I don't think I realized how fortunate I was growing up as a kid in the suburbs, I was very, very fortunate, but I did not feel like I fit in my school. I didn't feel like I got along with the kids or that I had my people. And when I started my co-working space, I gave this big speech, and there was a reporter there, and she totally pegged me when she wrote the article. She's like, he gave this speech as if he had finally found his seat at the lunch table. And it was so true. It was exactly what it was. It's like I couldn't find my seat at the lunch table, so I had to make my own table. And that's basically what the co-working space was.
Sure.
So it was just this visceral desire to feel like I could find somewhere I could go where I felt like I could have that table where I belonged.
Yeah.
And it happened to be for me that as somebody who was working from home and losing my mind, being cooped up in my house all day, when I went and co-worked for the first time, before there were co-working spaces in New York, and there was this little group called Jelly that met in some guy's living room in Midtown, right? And I sat in this guy's couch. But that day I hung out with people my age who worked for themselves, who were kind of a little bit off the beaten path. And it was the first time I really felt like I belonged in a way that really kind of resonated with me. And that's what sent me on this incredible journey to build a physical space. But the physical space was really all about the people being able to get together and feel the same way that I felt.
Sure.
And then inspiring other people to build similar spaces. And what I'm curious about is how we can better activate those local community spaces to be gathering places for all kinds of fun stuff.
Sure.
The way that we did at my space.
Well, and I love it because you've really innovated in the physical space, whereas Jillian, you've done a lot of innovating in the virtual space, right?
Yeah.
With the Joy List. So talk about your journey through why Joy List exists and then how the book came about.
Yeah, so for me, the Joy List really started after Trump got elected in November 2016, where how all great things began.
Thanks, Trump.
Yeah, thanks. It was really interesting because when I moved to New York City, I didn't feel like I belonged. Similar to Tony, I had the experience of not really feeling like I had my people. I had kind of activity-based friends, but nobody who I felt like I could really drop my walls and be vulnerable and safe with them. And I took a year and a half to really just do a ton of stuff by myself. Festivals by myself, conferences by myself, events by myself, until I had finally found my people in New York City. And I really deeply believed that I could have friends who lift me up and make me feel really good about myself. And then it was this very interesting juxtaposition of, I feel like, the world is filled with love and New York City is incredible and all these people are amazing. And then Trump gets elected and everyone around me is like, I feel like I can't trust people, the world is on fire, like everything is terrible, everyone is terrible. And it was just like understandably so. I understood how people could say that. And I just wanted people to know any day of the week in New York City, if they feel like they can't trust people, there are at least two things going on every day of the week where you could be in community and connection and feel supported. So that's why I started the newsletter, was to be like, hey, here are these things I wish I knew existed when I moved to New York City. Hopefully it'll be helpful for all of you. And then I kept doing it because this bizarre thing began to happen where people would show up to me at parties and say, are you that Joy List person? I'd say, yeah. And then they would just share this deeply personal story with me of their experience of not feeling like they belong. And people who didn't even live in New York City started emailing me, telling me about their experience of being deeply lonely and disconnected. And that's when I realized how much of an issue this is in America. Is I started Googling, as we all would do, and it was just like, wait, this is a huge problem that I have literally never heard someone talk about before. So I'm gonna keep doing this thing.
Sure.
And that's also how the book evolved, is I had a mentor say to me, if you want to be an expert in something, and if you really want to see, if you want to commit your life to something, write a book about it. See if you like hanging out with that type of person, and then see if you can commit to it in the long term. So kind of the book for me, it was an exploration for myself to see, do I want to commit to community building? Is this my personal ministry? And also, I didn't see any books written by young people about being lonely, and Gen Z and millennials are the loneliest generations, and there was nothing written by us about our problem. And I was like, I don't know, I'm 24 years old, so I don't know if I could write a book. But then someone was telling me, That's exactly why you should write the book. You don't see any books written by someone your age about this issue. That's your issue. So that was why I did it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic, and it really builds this sense of you saw a mandate and you took it, right? And you saw this purpose that was so that just needed to be done, and you seized upon it, right? Which I think is fantastic. You know, the one-on-one is fantastic. The ability to activate people is fantastic. But how does this translate for thousands, and in your case, millions of people?
I'm like wiggling because I'm so excited about this question. I'm just like, I want to answer this question.
Yes.
Because this is the thing that we are still figuring out, and this is literally why all of you are here right now, is because we need all of your help to actually make this thing work. But what we've started thinking is, okay, great leaders empower other people to be leaders. This thing is not about the two of us hosting a bunch of events and somehow 1 million people show up. That is crazy, and that is way too us-centered, and that is not in alignment with our values anyways.
Sure.
So what we're seeing is that the best way to reduce loneliness, obviously, is to bring people together. And there's already all of these open source, easy ways to bring people together that exist out there. Some really simple examples, our friend Kurt hosts this thing called Poetry Lunch every Wednesday. There's a different prompt every week, your friend Kurt as well.
Yeah.
And everyone just gets together and reads a poem about the topic. And the first time I went, 3 people cried. And I was just like, what is this? This is incredible. These people don't even know each other. But the fact that it's like, okay, we're all gonna get together, we're gonna eat food, and we're gonna participate in some soul-based art. Incredible, so rare, so nice to have that time in the week. And so to say, okay, what if we publish what Tony would call this recipe for belonging, this recipe for step-by-step how you host a poetry lunch. Super simple. We have a network of people who have all raised their hand and said, I want to create a space for people to come together, but I'm not sure what to do. We blast out this recipe for belonging to all of these people. Suddenly, there's hundreds of people around the world hosting a poetry lunch. And what if we did that with a ton of different recipes for belonging, giving all different types of people ways to bring people together? That's what we want to do. That's what we need all of your help with. And I'm sure you all probably had a bunch of thoughts of like, oh, but this thing wouldn't work, or like, oh, that thing could be better. And that's why we need to talk to all of you, because this is just an idea that we're talking about with a few people, and we're super excited to just get a big group of people excited about this.
And I'll just add, this isn't coming out of nowhere. This is building on what we've personally
Yes.
experienced. I saw this happen naturally with the co-working movement and with that thing in the living room, Jelly, which was just like an informal gathering that anybody could, there's jellies all over the world, and many of them led to co-working spaces. With so many of the events on the Joy list, a lot of them are events that are scaling up to other cities. Some of them are in a bunch of other cities. Some of them have just gotten started. And we know, talking to the founders of those communities, they're building some really great little local gathering. And now they're getting emails from people all over the world saying, I love this idea. Can I do it in my city? And they're like, I barely know what I'm doing in my city. And now, now you want me to tell you how to do it in your city? This is crazy. I don't know what I'm doing. So if we can help those people with a good idea, somebody like Kurt with Poetry Lunch, take their thing from one city to 100, then then we're going to be in good shape.
Yeah.
If I were trying to do something together